Can you hear me? What about other people? Can you hear them? No, can you actually hear what they're saying? Let me be more specific here. When you come across a person, be it physically or digitally, any age, race, ethnicity, political affiliation, do you actually hear them out? What if I were to tell you that that wasn't the case 50 odd years ago? Plenty would say that's not even the case now. Tell me this, is society encouraging discourse? I'm talking good, productive, healthy, and unifying conversations. The kind that leaves you with this lingering feeling of empathy for the other perspective, an understanding and agreement on the way forward. When the cameras are on, when there's money on the line and lives that could be saved, what's communication like between humans then? Is nuance embraced? Or is it ridiculed? I'm Deb Shaw. And this
is Take Two.
Now
Just you. Hopefully, if I did, you'd cut it out of the...
Listen, we were talking about TikTok, right?
Yeah.
If I need to go viral.
Yeah, just share my information, my passwords, and be like, go look through his emails.
Exactly.
God, he orders a lot of pizza.
Is it pizza for you?
Yeah?
Yeah?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I had, for 2020, right, I would have filmed a second a day.
Oh, yeah.
And obviously this would have happened before the pandemic was announced. So January, you know. Lo and behold, it was like the perfect time to actually record a second a day. We ate so much pizza.
Yeah.
Like it's literally, and that is just the shots that I
was
included.
Your second a day. You're like, I gotta get this pizza in.
I was just like, not even thinking straight. I'm just like, you know,
yeah.
Pizza, quirky, you know. Then lo and behold, you just play it back and you're like, I am a pig.
Yeah.
And it's because I discovered Supermax.
Oh, yeah.
And it was Supermax pizza. So technically Papa John's.
Yeah.
Killer.
Yeah, you get done with that.
Killer.
I have to watch that now. Love the idea of just like every now and then just pizza.
Yeah, you do. I'll send it to you. And please note that is probably not all the pizza that I ate.
Yeah.
You know, it was only after a while. Which is your takeaway pizza of choice?
Me. I used to be a Domino's man, but I'm more Apache now.
That was my first. So when I first moved to Ireland, right? Oranmore, there was an Apache, and that was like my go-to spot. And because I thought, not even discovered, but I was like, oh, this is the go-to place. I can dip pizza into this sauce. Garlic mayo.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Never tried it before. And then I was like, Jesus Christ, like this is amazing. I brought my parents over to Apache.
You have to see the local delicacies.
I thought that was a local delicacy.
Yeah. Look at how the Irish live. Isn't it beautiful?
Yeah, look at this place. There's this sauce. Do you like it? Then lo and behold, every time I ordered the pizza, it was just like, there you go. Then
yeah.
Garlic mayo included. Now I'm a bitch if there isn't garlic mayo included. Or if I forgot.
Welcome to privilege. Yeah.
Anyways, TED Talk.
TED Talk, yeah.
Mr. TED Talk, man. How are you doing?
I'm fine. It's weird that it's done.
Yeah, and it's out as well.
Yeah. And it's got lots of views and good feedback. And it's much nicer being on this side of it than the other side of it. The side that was in the preparation side and the lead up to doing it. That side was stressful. Then doing it was like white light, no consciousness. It just happened. And then afterwards, it was just relief.
Yeah.
And it's done. And now it's something to be kind of happy with rather than something was at the time very like, I have to get this right. You don't do this twice kind of thing. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with it, I think. Yeah, I was pretty content.
You did a good job.
I think so.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I want to ask you something.
Sure.
So, you know, sometimes it's like, I don't know about you, but maybe doing a TED Talk was like on your like goals list, right? Then the opportunity comes and you're like, okay, I'm taking it. What was that feeling like until you walked off stage? Was it?
It was a lot. I think it was one of those things that you'd say, oh, I want to do that. That'd be a great achievement. But then when it's actually in front of you, it's big.
It's massive.
It's huge, and like you don't even know what to think you'd do afterwards. I never had thought that far. But then when it was in front of me, I was just like, oh. And then it kind of hit me of, I never thought I wanted to do a bad TED Talk. I wanted to do a good one, like one that was well put together and well structured. But the moment I got that opportunity, that was what went through my head. That moment was, I have to nail this. If I don't nail this, I'm going to regret that forever and ever and ever. And it went, I think I did fine. But every moment from the moment I found out it was happening to the moment it actually happened, high stress. And it was the only thing I could think about. I was like not going anywhere. I was just rehearsing, writing, fixing. But then it happened. And it was just this overwhelming like relief. Just huge sense of, even afterwards, I was just like, that wasn't bad. Whether it was good or not, I didn't know. Because I hadn't gotten to listen to it. I wasn't even conscious when I was doing it. I was just like, but I know it wasn't bad. I didn't stumble. I didn't lose myself. I didn't forget to say anything. But afterwards, it was just so much relief.
Yeah.
Which would then, now I'm a little bit like, what the hell do I do next?
I know.
It's like, what? And which is such a human feeling. Like, you're always like,
you got to that step. What's
the next
What's
step?
next? Are you going to write a book?
Huh?
Are you going to write a book?
I'm trying to write a thesis first.
Maybe publish that thesis.
Maybe, yeah. Like I'd be publishing papers with my research and stuff. But a book, I guess. But it's weird, isn't it? It's that step, and it's not something I never thought beyond that. I was like, I'd be gas. Like when I was doing like the Fame Lab, the science communication competitions and stuff, I'd be like, geez, TED Talk, that would be it, that'd be cool. Never thought beyond it. And I've barely had time to process it, to think beyond it. I suppose a book, but I'm not a writer. I'm a speaker.
There's ghostwriting.
Ghostwriting. That'd be great.
Whoopsies.
Save me so much hassle.
Yeah, I think the concept of a book is so cool. Now, did you have any mentors or anyone helping you throughout the process when it came to the TED Talk?
For the TED Talk? Not particularly. I'm very much so a bit on my own with the science communication. Like, I work with people, but I don't have anyone pointing me in the right direction and telling me to go for anything. Like, I'd have people I look up to hugely, alive and dead, just like people who are just in the stars and skies as far as like communicating science in like a romantic way and like
storytelling.
Yeah, and pulling the humanity out of facts and why something matters as opposed to anything else. But as someone who actually mentored me, not really. No one, like I'd be running scripts past friends and past people just to kind of be like, is there anything really bad in here? Is there anything, am I misspeaking at any point? Because it's so important, especially when talking about women's health and inclusion, that I can't really stumble. Because if I stumble over something small, people will hook onto it and it'll unravel the whole thing. And that's something that has to be really kept in mind. It's definitely a lesson learned off TikTok. One word gone and latched.
Yeah.
And your whole point in communication will be unraveled from that point because it's a distraction. So it was definitely something I was very conscious of, and you need another pair of ears to get that. But as far as a mentor, I don't think so.
Yeah,
I don't think
I find that really interesting. Like, I keep trying to observe. Right now I'm going through a phase, right, where I'm observing like the way Western Europe functions and the way America functions. And the concept of communication opportunities, just like moving forward. And sometimes I go like, I feel like Europe is interesting because like there's so much that can be done. But then when it comes to commercialization or something, it's like we don't have not even that hand to hold, because I'm not saying that we need our hands held, but we're really figuring this stuff out as we go. And it's kind of like our generation. Yeah. Versus I think like in America, now I wouldn't be sure, but I do think that in America, they kind of got it, It can help you out a little bit. So yeah, that's why I asked about the mentors and all that. You mentioned TikTok. Have you ever gotten in trouble on there? On
TikTok? In trouble in what way? As in like
people latching onto words, facts.
Well, when I've had to block so many people from just I'd
You
say,
went down a scary route with COVID, though.
yeah, I'd say I had to block about 150 people for
Stop.
just continuously and I had a rule, and the rule was you can attack what I'm saying but not me. And I was like, if you attack me, you're missing the point. And I was like, if you disagree with what I'm saying, fine, you can comment that, you can say this is wrong, that is wrong, and I'll disagree, no problem. But it turned into a thing where people were like latching onto it and kind of thinking, this guy is trying to agree with the government, which is taking away our freedoms, which is, a fair enough complaint. But then latching onto he's a bad person as opposed to what he's saying is wrong. And there was a lot of anger, which was very reasonable. But it was the thing of when I was in that COVID space, which I'm so glad I'm not in anymore. So glad that everyone has moved on, because like very happy I did it. Thought I did a decent job at it. Thought it was like clear, but also it wasn't enjoyable. And a lot of my own communications was me having the same feelings as everyone else, except maybe I was more lucky because I was able to go out, understand what was going on, and communicate it. And I was learning for myself to calm myself down and be like, no, this is actually manageable. This is calm. This is the timeline. And then I was communicating that because it helped other people too. That was great. But you know what's better than that? Not having to do that. Not having to do that is 10 times better.
Picking your battles, eh?
I think so, yeah. But in saying that again, like I do a lot of talking now about like women's health and kind of like trying to introduce like where science isn't so right. And I remember even putting up a video talking about how clinical trials could be designed so much better to include women and the whole history of it. And I had people commenting, oh, look at you doing a full 180. Now you're anti-science and you're talking against it. And I was like, you're so angry.
You're so angry and you can't let it go. And the thing is that like, I think people just take short form content as it,
Yes.
This is it. Mm-hmm. And I remember going through a process, right, where, because like technically, if you want to be heartless and win at the game, there is a formula to winning TikTok. Yes. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And it's kind of like, so I was posting like podcast clips. How dare you? Like I was getting so angry at a point of being like, you know where to go to listen to the whole argument. Do you want the timestamps? I will give them to you. I was literally giving timestamps to people. Yeah. You know what I mean?
I do.
Because context is everything. That's the context for you. And then people are like, no, but I'm taking this short form piece of content as it is because this is how it was presented to me. I was like, fuck.
Yeah.
Like, I understand that, but there should be a promotion of personal responsibility when it comes to research.
Yeah.
When it comes to feelings too. Yeah. You know what I mean?
I do, but I think people don't. Do people owe you that? Is another conversation too. At the end of the day, they're just consuming the media in front of them and having a visceral reaction, which, and maybe that's everywhere in a way. Like, how many TikToks does the average person flick through and respond to versus how many do they follow up on?
Yeah.
Probably a very small number.
And that's where I kind of slowed down a little bit because I was like, okay, they don't owe me like looking. I know he sighs.
I know.
That was the cat, everyone, by the way. He's very bored. But when I received that comment, I was like, okay, if they don't want to tune in, that's okay. I can't be mad at them. And at first I kind of like took it on myself of being really careful with how I curated the things and all that. But then I was nearly manipulating a conversation in order to make someone that probably won't appear on the algorithm happy.
Yeah.
So then okay, I took personal responsibility, but for who and for what? And it's that balance that you kind of have to figure out when it comes to this stuff in general, where now I'm just kind of like managing expectations. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If someone comments, I'm just like, look, this is a podcast clip. I wrote down episode number, Yeah. The person, like someone, I had Diarmuid Burke on, and And he was talking about the European identity and all that kind of stuff. And he mentioned like 2 types of people that identify with it. And the second person he said were white nationalists.
Right. Okay.
And I was like, okay, do I leave it in? Do I not?
Yeah.
But he started his sentence with 2 types of people. I can't go back in time and have him change that. No.
Yeah.
What do I do? Do I leave one in and leave the second one out? No. I have to leave it in. You know, sorry. Someone commented and I told them, I'm like, listen, if you want, like they accused me of clickbait. And I was like, if I wanted to clickbait you, that would have been at the beginning.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's true. Yeah.
So now I'm just like managing my expectations of like, no, I assess myself. I'm okay. Yeah. Now it's up to you. Like send it with God.
Yeah, it's true. But there's the 2 sides of that is that if you don't engage in the clickbait culture when you're trying to do something good, the good will be left behind.
Yeah.
And, if you're trying to do something good and you're not playing the game, you'll be forgotten about. If you're trying to do something bad, it's very easy. It's very easy to be very emotive and get people very aggravated and purposefully manipulate things. But you kind of have to learn how to play the game in a non-aggressive way, a non-insulting way, a way that gets people emotional without actually being wrong or misinformation or driving them insane. Like talking about things that people care about without being racist, or without being like I'm not going to say political, but like anti-political or anti-politician individual kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like we have a lot of things like that floating around where you're just trying to say, don't we all hate this person? And it's like, okay, let's take that aside a little bit. And like, you're literally just causing a manhunt here. It's more, if we were going a different route, we would say these series of ideals and ideas are much better than what this person has. 2 views.
Oh.
Yeah, no one would listen to that. But then, I don't know, maybe if you try to negate that completely and maybe talk about it, like we were talking earlier about like the anarchist Leak, who does a lot of that, of just talking about positive information and just trying to contribute information. And that not everything he says is perfect or done in a non-clickbaity way. He knows what he's doing. He's very good at it. But at the end of the day, it's educational.
Yeah.
And he's not trying to cause a revolution that hurts anyone. He's just trying to inform people about a point of view.
He also, obviously, he's anonymous. That helps.
Yeah.
So the only thing, like, people were insulting him on my one, right?
Yeah.
You see him come back like no other. Because he has nothing to lose. The only critique he gets is, why am I going to listen to someone wearing a balaclava?
So true. Yeah.
That's the only thing they can tell him. Yeah. Only thing. And that's so, like, I remember seeing that and being so mesmerized, you know?
Yeah.
And then he comes back being like, well, fuck you.
Yeah.
Why am I going to listen to user 12345?
Yeah, I'd love to do that.
Yeah.
But not everyone can do that.
No.
Like I know from my point of view anyway, it's very much so that, for example, when I was talking about COVID and stuff, the amount of people who are like, I want to check out your credentials. What's your history? You're talking about science. Why should I listen to you? What have you done to earn any kind of listening to? And I was like, geez, that to a degree, fair enough. Like, what am I meant to say back to that? Like, if I was completely anonymous, it'd be very hard to put any trust in what I was doing. But I wasn't anonymous.
No.
And that kind of added a bit of weight, because then I was getting a lot of people who were like, oh, thank God I found someone who isn't talking out of their ass or isn't talking nonsense or who actually knows what they're talking about. And it was that combination of like being verifiably somewhat qualified and talking about what I was talking to. So there's another, again, I suppose we're talking a lot about the complexity of these things where, God, I'd love to be anonymous, but I don't know if people would trust me if I was anonymous.
They wouldn't trust me either.
Yeah.
You know? So, no, I think it's just with him, it works.
Yeah.
It works.
It does.
Branding of a leak, like, it just like fits. And also the way he talks is just immediately like, we're going to talk about this. All right, cool, I'm joining.
Yeah, I'm in.
Leak man.
Yeah.
When it came to you working on COVID, through COVID.
Right.
What was that like behind the scenes? Forget content. I'm saying like
behind the scenes.
Yeah, like decision making. Like, what were your observations?
Are we which decision making now? Are we talking about like me on the side of the communication side, or are we talking about the whole COVID?
The whole thing.
The whole thing. Oh my gosh.
I don't want to get into vaccines, so we're going to leave that out.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, well, I think the whole thing in retrospect is very easy to pick apart, but at the time was quite reasonable. You know, like at the very, very beginning, we reacted very strongly because we had no idea what was happening. Very fair.
Yeah.
As time moved, things slowly became more and more confident, and like we had a huge, a lot of ideas were given birth to, and a lot of ideas died very quickly. Because what would happen is everyone threw an idea out into the spectrum of existence, and all of the ideas that made no sense and didn't come true vanished. And then all of the ideas that were left that were slowly proven correct, it continued. And this existed for the scientists and the conspiracy thinkers. From every single person on every single side, it just kept moving forward. Because at the start, there was no data to back any of these ideas. But over time, it developed. So it's very easy to like look back and be like, this was so predictable. And it's like, it wasn't that predictable. You know, it wasn't. It was just you threw paint at the wall and were hoping for an art piece, you know, hoping, and it worked. And honestly, there was a lot of that. I think not everything was done perfectly. I think a lot of the time, the communications were crap. I've said that before. I thought the communications were not just bad, but like aggravating an already angry population.
Yes.
And there was a lack of respect between the people making decisions and respecting what was happening with, you know, looking at like civil liberties and trying to be like, you acknowledge what you're doing, which I agree with 90% of it. Like looking back, the dates and everything that was done, I agree with most of it. What I don't agree with was that I don't think they acknowledged what they were taking away. I also don't agree that they replaced the gap with enough. Like a lot of the times they were like, stay at home, do this, do that, without actually making up for it with the things you're losing. Because what we were losing was a lot of our mental health. And a lot of us were locked up, and that was all we were told to do. We were just told, sit inside, wait till it's over. Yeah. And like any species locked up, we all got problems and we all got stressed and we all dealt with that. And there wasn't enough in response to that, I don't think. There was like a book, go for a walk, and like, fine, great advice, but the focus should have been on that. And maybe that kind of touches on like a physical versus mental health. Mental health is not respected like a physical illness is, whilst COVID was very physical. So we were very afraid. I agree.
Yeah.
I think there was that aspect of it. Now, like I said, not everything was communicated perfectly. Like I think things like I remember Professor Philip Nolan coming out and talking about the antigen tests like snake oil. And that was so poor. And the reason that was poor was because we didn't have data to say either way, which meant that, as we have found, antigen tests are great tools. But since he said that, he wrecked public trust in what he was saying. Because he basically said, as one of the leading people making decisions, this thing is crap. And then a few months later said, we use this all the time.
Yeah, and that's the issue with politicians.
Yeah.
That I feel like they really lack one important thing that, in my opinion, will gain them more trust, and I don't understand why they don't do it, which is owning up to their mistakes.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, they are human.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to be a politician, you are going to fuck up at a point in time. Yeah. I will fuck up.
Yeah.
I feel like, I don't know, I could be wrong, but I feel like I would gain more trust if I were to be like, you know what? I know I said that.
Mm-hmm.
I was going through this. This is what I was facing with at the time. Here's the context. I apologize. I will do better. I don't understand why they would rather go the route of belittling a population, maybe like gaslighting them and ignoring them.
Yeah.
I don't get it. And I think that's what like doesn't sit well with me. I think also with COVID and the lockdowns, lockdown 3
is where I think shit hit the fan. The third one.
Mm.
And the reason for that is, I know that COVID is not a sport, but I kind of use that analogy in my head where I'm like, if this were a sports game, if plan A didn't work, plan B didn't work, and now we're in lockdown 3, I would say, get what you learned from lockdown 1, what you learned from lockdown 2, what didn't work, and then have a new plan. And I think with the third one, that's where shit hit the fan, because they're like, you know what, we're going to do the exact same thing. That didn't work.
Yeah.
And then it's just kind of like the conspiracy theorists, unfortunately, now have more power, because they're like, what were they saying? They were saying this is all going to change the moment that something else is going to come through, something more important. Russia versus Ukraine.
Yeah.
And that's it.
And I hear that. But also, if you go back to when COVID happened, they did say that this pandemic will last 2 years. And what happened 2 years later, but the Russia-Ukraine thing coming through. You touched on a lot there. I'm trying to go back through it all. I think it's one thing that's really, really, really tough and really tricky to understand, or maybe I should say communicate especially, is that there's only so many things we can actually do to stop the spread of a disease. And we had to lock down again and again and again. And that's because did it completely stop it? No. Did it stop it enough that the country didn't entirely collapse? Kind of.
Yeah.
You know.
For me, it was more like, what I was questioning is, why weren't they prioritizing negative tests?
Yeah.
That was the one thing where I was like, from a civilian, a general pop that doesn't have any knowledge into this, I was like, they're saying that you can still get COVID if you're vaccinated, and sometimes like these things don't happen. Now I understand that the tests sometimes could be wrong, but why aren't they prioritizing negative? You know, because I was like, wouldn't that help stop the spread a little bit more? That was like my thinking.
Yeah, my only thing would be is all I'd have to do is open up the test and run water through it, and there it doesn't matter.
It's
then
the proof.
And,
okay,
like that'd be my only fear of like I agree with you. Like ideally, I would have loved to have seen like a line for like a pub or a club where it's like you go in, you pay your entrance fee, you pay for a test or something.
Yeah.
You go into a little bubble for like 5 minutes. You wait for the result and you go, I'm in, and then you head in. But that never really came to fruition. And even at the time when it was all happening, like with that third lockdown, with that Omicron wave, our trust in antigen tests wasn't high. But the problem that happened was so many people got COVID that our confidence that we needed could be lowered. And we were like, we don't have, because we were getting 20, 30,000 a day.
Yeah.
And the reality of the situation is there were more than we were detecting, much more. Like the estimates were we were detecting 40, 50%.
Yeah.
So reality at the worst of it, we were seeing likely 60, 70,000 cases per day at that time. Now, we didn't have the facilities to do that. Most of the time with COVID, we were spending something like 15 to 20 million a day running those COVID test centers to do the testing we were doing, which was like 10,000. And when it was going way beyond that, we were like, this is impossible, like impossible situation. So this thing that we, oh my Lord, hi buddy. This thing that we don't, they're coming for me. This thing that we don't have a lot of confidence for now has to fill the gap. Because what's the alternative? The alternative is either we think this might work, we're not 100% sure, but it's our only option. So then antigen tests suddenly got yoinked into the fold and using that more. And we've just kept it since because it was like, now we have the evidence that it works, even though
I see
it was a bit like that.
That helps me out a little bit. And I think it might help out a few listeners too, that you kind of highlighted that it was the communication that could have been better.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And I think I never like put that into perspective, where it was the communication at the end of the day. Like certain decisions, damn boy, that's crunchy over there. It's fine. They're condenser mics. Neon is just eating like dry cat food. Anyways, yeah, it's the communication, because there were certain like decisions being made, even back home as well, where it was like, where is this coming from? And I think that's where the anger came from. Just be honest.
Yeah.
Be honest. And I don't get why they steer away from it.
Yeah.
I really don't get it.
I don't know. I think there's like a lot of layers to it. Like brilliant people are often crap teachers. Like you see that a lot in universities and stuff.
It's
where
like,
you
because
have
I
these-
said so, like, don't argue with me.
Yeah, a lot of people like that. I think there's also like, then there's another side of politicians want to be assertive leaders, confident, have vision, which leaves no room for nuance. Because you don't want to follow someone into battle who says, if all of these things work, we have a good odds of not dying. Let's go. Let's fight. Let's do it. You want someone who'd be like, we back each other. We love each other. We're going to do this for each other. Which, you know, effectively is like very inspirational stuff, but completely avoiding the point of what's actually happening. It's like, it's more so changing the perspective. But when you're trying to be a leader, and at least what we're classically used to following, humans, we like assertive. We like confident. We like all those things, which makes it very hard to then go back and say, oh, this person made a mistake. And yeah, that makes them a bit weaker.
Yeah.
And how many times can you do that before you lose it? And we do live in, you know, for like a politician or something like that. At what point is it better? You know, what if you're in this most powerful position in the country, making these decisions that are actively going to either take lives or save lives? And what's the best thing to do in a situation where you could own up to something and, you know, say, look, I made a bit of a mistake there. But then that could lead to distrust in your next decision. And that next decision could be the difference of 10,000 lives.
I see.
So, like, no, I'm not saying that I necessarily agree, but there's definitely a proportionality there where you have to make those calls. I would always prefer to see scientists own it. Always. It's not a scientist's place or a doctor's place to double down. It's not. Evidence-based. Change your opinion based on new evidence. That is how that should work. It should be part of the code. But I do at least have empathy for that decision that might have to be made, where maybe you don't double down, but maybe you don't apologize either. And you just move forward. And maybe you've protected a proportion of the population who still has some trust in what you're saying. But if you don't, they might say, they'll be wrong about this too.
Yeah.
I'm not going to listen. And then that can cause it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying where I stand either way. I think it's very complicated is all I'm saying.
No. It is complicated, but you did open up a new door in approaching it that way. It's kind of like the world we live in now, there's no Trojan horse, you know? We're not fighting with swords.
No.
So I do think there has to be a little bit of an adaptation when it comes to like I feel like the way it's adapted is rather than wearing like your knight in shining armor and leading the fucking pack and no one talk to me because I'm leading you. Now it's like all eyes are on me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very different kind of pressure.
Absolutely. But still the same humans.
Yeah.
Still the same humans.
Still the same. And that's, I think that's like where we're at right now with the 21st century, you know?
I think so.
Last question on this, and then we're going to move on. Was there ever a moment where you were like really frustrated when it came to like, no, this is how it should be communicated. Why aren't you listening to me, Mr. Decision Makers?
Oh, yeah. No, there was. I made a video about antigen tests around the time when Lidl were releasing them and around that time. And I made a video that I was 100% would go super viral. It was like this whole boxing themed Lidl versus Tony Houlihan video that I made that was completely scientifically solid, completely explained all the problems that we're having. It even included, like, it was saying like, don't use them, but if you're using them, this is how you should use them, because there was a whole nother problem with the government were like saying, don't use it, but then also not teaching people how to use it if you do, which was not helpful. But when I sent it in, the social media team loved it. They were like, this is cracker. This is great. But then it got sent in to the Department of Health to get fact checked. And it got fact checked. And I didn't hear back about it for like 6 or 7 weeks.
Oh, wow.
Which meant the moment was gone.
Yeah.
And I was very frustrated at that because I put like 48 hours solid work, very little sleep. I was like, this has to get out. This is so important right now because everyone is talking about it. It's really stressful. And I didn't really get an explanation either. They said, yeah, factually correct. Could you tone down the drama? And they said that about 2 months later. So it was gone. The moment was gone. And I think the reason was because when I made the video, I was making like the government versus little. You know, I was like, that's the idea here. Which I was like, this is funny. You know, this isn't a serious thing. But I think they were like, oh, he's trying to make a drama out of how the government and little are having a fight and we don't need that. And I was just like, oh, but you're missing the point. You're missing the point, which is it would have gotten out and it would have gotten a lot of interaction and it would have taught people about what's going on with antigen testing, would have taught people how to use the antigen testing, and it would have given them a good perspective on what the hell is going on, of why little can do it and why they disagree and why both is okay.
Yeah.
You know, and that was the whole point. And they were just, but it was the fact that they ghosted me.
Yeah.
Yeah, they ghosted me. And like, I was doing other videos and I'd always be in an email, I'd be like, hey, by the way, how's this doing? We're kind of missing the moment. And I eventually just stopped asking.
Yeah.
And I got like an email back from one of the deputy CMOs that was just like, great video, tone it down and we'll put it out. And I was like, whatever.
Damn it.
I was like, I don't care. So,
yeah.
So yes.
I think in hindsight, it's kind of like, always in hindsight though, if you are independent in that moment.
Yeah.
So, but then that's the issue that I think a lot of creative people have. And I consider you a creative person too, which is if you were to do it independently, that video would have gone out. If you didn't take the opportunity that you were given, you wouldn't have probably had that platform and that access.
Exactly.
It's such a catch-22.
It really
such
was,
a catch-22.
Yeah. But at the same time, I think I was doing a lot more after. So that project ran from April to October. And in October, my personal TikTok had like 400 followers. And then by January, I had like 20 plus thousand.
I remember.
And I think that was just because I wasn't afraid of saying what I thought. And often I was like, look, I get it, but here's the reason it's a little complicated. Here's why, because everyone else is saying it so badly. And I was able to say that, but there was no wiggle room when I was doing it for them. But it was more of an emergency. So I do have empathy for the fact that the last thing they want to do is add fuel to a fire. I just wish the bigger picture came out and was like, look, even if the fire was bigger, it would get more attention and it'd be good attention, positive attention that would actually help people. But
exactly. That's okay.
Yeah.
It's on the hard drive.
It's on the hard drive. Yeah. It is indeed. It's in the Google Drive and it'll stay there forever.
Damn it.
Yeah.
I might monetize this and be like, give me the fucking TikTok. I'll pay you.
Yeah.
All right. So obviously this has been like a long journey for you. But when it comes to you and scientific research, you started off your TED Talk talking about you and your sister. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, well, my sister Anya has autism, which she mostly nonverbal for a very long time. Now she knows how to demand things like toast, coffee, and bananas, and anything she wants for Christmas. She got that now, no problem. But yeah, I think like even looking back to the TED Talk now, I wanted to start with that because I think it did a lot of good explaining about a perspective. And like the house I grew up in was just me, my mom, my sister. And obviously it was mostly my sister who I interacted with at home. And then I'd go to school and it would be like a completely different set of humans. And I had to learn to interact with both. And then like other things and seeing just like, this is weird. Humans are weird. How come my sister's like this? And then everyone at school is like this. And then I had other friends who were like Asperger's who were like very vocal, but again, behave differently. And it was just this whole experience. And I suppose that's probably what probably led me down the direction I'm in. Because I was just like like from a baby, from like 2, surrounded by this diverse population of humans. And I was just like, how the hell does this work? How on earth does this work at all? But at the same time now, I wouldn't go into like autism research because I think that might be too close to home.
Yeah.
It might be like I don't know how to phrase it properly, but like maybe too close from home. I've done it. It's a big part of my life already. I don't know if I want to bring work and family together.
I wouldn't want to touch on that either, just because you might get frustrated at a lot of things and very angry at things that are completely out of your control.
Yeah.
And then sometimes there's a little bit of bliss and ignorance, you know.
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
And you're better off keeping it that way, or else it will haunt you.
Yeah, I
think that's
so.
the thing with science, probably. It's just like sometimes the facts are there. You're like, oh.
Yeah. And sometimes the information doesn't help.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could understand it and it doesn't help. Like,
No.
You see that everywhere. It's very topical in mental health. You can understand it. That doesn't mean shit, though.
No.
You know, it doesn't help you at all. You know, boom.
Yeah. Okay, so that's a little bit of a backstory for you. And now you are a researcher in
sex differences.
Bada bing, bada boom.
Yeah.
Why that?
Why sex differences? I had like a lecture in the third year of college, and it was briefly mentioned, and it was like, it was literally like a slide, and it was just such a throwaway, and it was just like, yes, and to this day, women are twice as likely to have adverse side reactions to drugs. They're not as included in clinical research or preclinical research, and in the neurosciences, it's women or females are used 10 times less than males. And then swiftly moving on to the next bit of neurocircuitry or whatever. And I was just like,
hold on.
what did you just say? Like, I just froze a bit. And after the lecture, I remember just being like a little shocked. I was like, is this a thing that everyone's just cool with? And it's just like, yeah, this is a thing. And people were like, I was talking to someone and they were just like, you okay? And I was like, yeah, did you hear that part about the sex differences? And they're just like, no. What part? It just, because it was brushed over so fast, and I just kind of went into a bit of like, I was like, this is not a thing. Is this really a thing that like everything we understand is so fundamentally based in males, and in females it's just extrapolated? And yeah, I ended up going down that rabbit hole hard, and I did my FYP on it, I did my master's on it, and I'm doing my PhD on it.
Welcome to our world, Andrew.
Yeah. Bleak.
Oh my God.
Very bleak.
It's so like,
yeah.
I think only this year am I slowly starting to come into realization that I feel like women have to constantly adapt to men.
Now, personally, my own work is more so in the disease side. I'm
Okay.
trying to like look at how factors of sex actually interact with disease and why women are more likely to get certain diseases and men are more likely to get other diseases, and trying to figure out where that's coming from, whether it's genetic or whether it's from hormones or from life experience and things like that, which is much easier for men to do because men have less life stages than women do, because women will go through like puberty and then menstrual cycles and then pregnancies and then birth controls and then menopause, and there's all of these different things which are hormonal, and hormones affect everything.
Yeah.
Whilst men are just kind of like, whoop, they go up very high and then they decline very slowly, starting around 40, and they never really.
Yeah, and then they buy a yacht. Maybe get like a 20-year-old pregnant.
Maybe they buy a
you
yacht.
know,
Yeah,
and that's it. Yeah. I want to take it back a notch because you mentioned menopause.
Yes.
And in your TED talk, you use that as an example. Is it so? You said that they carried out a study on menopause without bringing in a woman.
Yeah.
Why?
Why?
Like in that moment, like
Yeah.
what do you think? Like what did your research lead to?
Well, their idea at the time was that they didn't actually care about the menopause. They cared about the hormone's potential to treat the thing. But they were basically saying, well, this hormone in women causes this problem, so maybe we can weaponize it to be a cure or a treatment to prevent these disorders. So they were just like, this is such a huge problem for women. Let's see if it works in men.
Wow.
You know, that was the thinking. That was where their brain was going. They were like, even though this is a problem that was like only identifiable in women, they were like, but they were almost using the population of women as lab rats and saying, when we take away this hormone from half of the population, they're more likely to get this disease and die, which means maybe we can weaponize this hormone to treat men.
treat men. But what do you mean by weaponize this hormone?
So as in to use it as a treatment. So to take its natural function and reintroduce it, whether it be to women or to men or to whoever it works, to actually treat a disease, like prevent a heart problem or anything like that. So there was a lot of thinking around that kind of stuff, but it's so messy. And thankfully, it's so much better today in clinical trials. It's a lot better in preclinical, but it still has a long way to go. But like horror stories in the 70s and 80s and things like that of just like really awful trial design, and where it was going through stages of women were banned and then it was turned and they were like, actually, we recommend you use women, but we're never going to force you to. And then like Supreme Court decisions that were like trying to reintegrate women back in and being used. Like there was a Supreme Court decision in the 90s, which was basically the trade unions and companies versus a woman who was not hired because she was pregnant. And the idea was that she wasn't hired because the job would be a risk to the fetus. And the Supreme Court had to say, that's not good enough. Now that opened up a whole new door, because then it was like, right, if women can make the decision themselves to work somewhere where it puts this at risk, it means maybe they can also make the decision to put themselves and the fetus at risk in a clinical trial. Because a lot of the ideas behind excluding women from clinical trials was, what if they're pregnant? What if they're pregnant? And what if this drug does something terrible to the fetus? And if the fetus is then born and can't live because of the drug? And basically, it was just about the power there. What's more important? And it just kind of boiled down to, in the 90s, kind of just saying, it's the woman's informed choice to make. And once they make that choice, it's no one else's business. And it really opened up a lot of ethics, which is very interestingly worded. Like the 3 core elements of clinical research is beneficence, it has to work; justice, it has to serve a positive purpose in society; and respecting the person, or persons as it's phrased. So respecting persons, which is the idea of you can make that choice, you have to protect the person, you have to make sure you can give them informed decisions. It's really, really complicated. The whole story going back to like the thalidomide incident, where women were given morning sickness pills, which led to the death of tens of thousands of babies because they were born with deformations after taking this pill. And that only got onto the market because of shoddy testing, where before 1960, right, they only had to show that a drug was safe, but they were never checked. They just had to do it themselves. They didn't even have to show it worked. They just had to show it was safe. So they do it in their own back room. They could make up the data and bring it in. Then in the 60s, they were like, oh, now we have to show it works. Which they'd go back to their back room and show it works. So now they had to show it was safe and show that it works. And then in the 70s, they were like, right, we're going to make sure it's safe. And hopefully it'll work too. And this was the moment that they were like, right, but now we're going to take it really seriously and we're going to exclude women because they might be pregnant and we're not having a thalidomide happen again.
Which, in that context, you kind of understand.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was. And that was the whole... it was like an era of science of being hyper protective because they didn't understand. And we're currently also in an era of protectionism regarding gene therapies because we don't understand them enough, so we're not doing them. Right? So this is something that always happens. So when we started clinical trials, we overreacted and we excluded women completely. I'm not including myself in that we, by the way. But
the scientific community.
Yeah, the scientific community excluded it out of fear. But the problem is then women were just dying so much more often than men.
Yeah.
It was a huge, huge problem. And it was happening all over the place. Like you were even having things like, it was actually the HIV epidemic that was actually driving getting women back into trials, because men at the time during HIV, the only way to actually get treatments were to jump into clinical trials. That was the only chance you had. But they were only taking men. And women were then excluded from having any access to any treatments. So then it flipped again. And that was another driver of, right, well, women want to go into this.
Yeah.
And they need to get into it. So it's all very complicated. And there's a big, big, dark, scary history. And I have no idea what question you asked that led me here. But
I love it, though.
yeah, it's a lot.
It's so much. But
it's so much.
I think that probably, if people listening to this, especially if they are women, I think it just makes them feel a little bit less angry knowing that. And it just kind of like hit me. I was like, oh yeah, pregnancy tests weren't around, you know? Like we're so new to this.
Yeah.
But like we have virtual reality goggles, but this, what you're talking about isn't even 100 years ago.
No, less than 50. That it wasn't actually brought in until 93. Yeah, 93.
Like that's so quickly, like probably in terms of everything happening.
Yeah.
Which I think sometimes might help in dwindling down certain frustrations at things that are out of your control. Because you're like, we're still early to this.
Yeah.
But again, I don't know. It's just like, holy shit. I think it's more just like in that moment in time, I think that's where the concept of nuance comes in, where why didn't someone ask, why can't we bring in women? Like, why didn't they question it in that moment in time and bring it on?
Yeah,
you know?
But that's probably a very reasonable source of the frustration.
Yeah.
Because the reason they didn't was because they didn't acknowledge that there were differences between men and women, even though they were obvious. Like the term was bikini medicine. Everything outside of the bikini.
What does bikini medicine mean?
If it's outside of the bikini, it's the same in men and women.
Stop.
That was the idea. It was like the only differences that existed between men and women were within the bikini.
So it's just genitals and that's it?
Just primary sexual characteristics.
Stuff.
Yeah.
Whoa.
That was the idea, and that's why they were like, sure, we don't have to. If we're not testing something that directly like impacts genitals, it's all the same. That was the thing. And they were also then, a lot of it comes back to who was available, and it was much easier to test in men because men were available. It was only men going to college in the 70s, really, and that's where these things were happening, you know. It was mostly like that, and they didn't have to control for hormone cycles, which is a whole nother logical fallacy, because they were like, we don't have to control for it, but it doesn't matter, you know, it doesn't do anything, which is still an argument I've had in the last 5 years.
Stop.
Yes, where it's like they're like, oh, we'll test in women, and they're like, we'll control for or we'll test in female mice, and I was like, yeah, we'll control for the estrous cycle, which is their menstrual cycle, and they were like, oh, but that doesn't make a difference. I was like, it's 2017. I was like, what do you mean? And I was like, how do I have to go through this? But anyway, I won't name names, but I did definitely. I just had so many moments of just pure frustration of still today trying to push the importance of looking at it. And it's still not great because it needs to improve. It's pretty bad. Like in clinical trials for Alzheimer's drugs at the moment, less than 15% of them actually report on any sex differences. They all include men and women, but none look at the difference.
Well,
none look at the difference. They're just like, yeah, we don't have to. It's not, you're not forced to. There's no regulation saying you have to look at male and female. You just have to look at all of them, which is really frustrating, because when I think back and I look back on all of the clinical trials that have happened for so many drugs, what if there was a situation where it really worked in men, but since women were involved, it was annihilated and we never saw it, or the vice versa? What if it really worked in women, but since you mixed all of the results together, you missed that? And that's very much so like the exact problem that medicine needs to figure out, because we absolutely have already run through drugs that will work for some people and not work for others, but we can't.
Yeah, like that's what I was going to ask you. Is there something prescribed that I can only get because I'm a woman, for example? Like, can the doctor go, girl, you get this? Or is that discrimination right now?
No. So that's precision. That's precision medicine. And there isn't a lot of good examples outside of like dosing,
Wow.
with like giving certain dosages, which still isn't perfect because like a 6'5" woman and a 5'2" man would get different things. I suppose because it's like, oh, this is what we give males, this is what we give females, as opposed to actually like taking the global differences into account. Now, taking the global differences into account is an insane amount of information to consider. Like we have to think about our entire genome. We have to think about how life experience has redesigned it and stuff like that. We have to think about general health. Like for some people, being slightly overweight isn't as big a deal as for other people. For other people, it's detrimental. How do you tell the difference? I don't know.
Wow.
And we don't know. And all of these play a part. All of these play a part. And like we have wide generalizations, like certain drugs will be cleared from a woman's system faster than a man's system. But this is on average. And it doesn't actually guarantee that maybe a man could take more of this drug and be safe. That's not true. It just means that on average, we can safely do that.
Okay.
You know, so this is a very complex issue, but probably the biggest barrier between actually doing it is money. Because let's say, and this is a big thing for like preclinical research, most research is done in males. In order to introduce females, we need to do it twice, and we need twice as much money. You know, so it's like trying to defend that. And then there's a huge argument then following that saying, right, but do you need to include females? What's your evidence that you need to include females to get effective results? And which is a logical fallacy, because an absence of evidence is not evidence of absence.
Wow.
Yeah, so like you can't really just say, where's your evidence? It's like, we haven't done it yet. You know, how am I meant to prove to you that this is valuable when we have an entire history showing that this work hasn't been done?
Wow.
And it needs to be done. And effectively, so many women are dying of certain diseases and men are dying of different diseases that we don't know why this is happening. So it has to be looked at. And then this is the fight that's going on. We want more money. Why do you need it? Prove to me. And it's a stalemate. It's like, what am I meant to say to that? So
that's so tough.
Very tough, very sticky situation. And like, as much as we like to pretend otherwise, money rules everything. Money makes the world go round. Everything good, everything bad, everything, it's driven by money.
Completely.
So it's very, very tricksy. And even looking at like trying to tell big companies, right, we want you to do precision research, right? Is it financially stable? Probably not. Is it financially stable to put so much money towards something that only provides help for such a minority of people? Because all you've done is lock down your market share, which is tiny. You could have like 1% of 1% of people who have a certain disease and be like, this drug works for you. And be like, we're going to save all these lives. The tiny amount. This is everyone. And you're like, I've made a drug that works for these people. They're not going to do it. Doesn't make sense. It's financially unstable. But that's precision medicine.
That's not fun. In saying that, you then went on with your TED Talk talking about the last mile problem.
Mm-hmm.
So now we know why it happened, how, but what is the last mile problem to you?
So to me, the last mile problem would be changing the direction that medicine looks at treating something from treating a disease, which has a common path in everybody, to treating the person and the individual with the disease, and how to best target this known path of the disease, but in this individual, and how we can use the information available of the individual to intercept the disease from happening, to pick the right drug, to pick the right treatment, to predict this happening. I think that's what I would call the last mile, because the idea of the last mile problem, like the original last mile problem, is that you can go so far, so fast, but that last little bit takes forever. And that's because we know how most diseases work. We're actually really good at knowing what's going wrong. We're just not very good at fixing it yet because it's complicated. So that last point that we're working through is all of these individual differences. We've figured out the diseases, the little things that can go wrong. But there's only so many diverse diseases. We're the problem. Now we're a whole new kettle of fish trying to understand people and the complexity of people. Of like, I use male and female as a example and what I'm doing, because I think it's like the first step. I think, right, this is, we're going to cut the pie in half and we have male, female. That's the first diversity we can deal with.
That's like onion peel number 1.
Exactly. Yeah, that's one. But then we can go within it, and we can even take age, kids, young adults, older adults, elderly, right? That splits it up again. Then you can take life experience. If you had issues as a children, if you're living with chronic illness, if you've taken previous medications, this all puts you into different paths. Then you can take ethnicity. So certain diseases and certain genetics and certain things are more present in one ethnicity than another. Certain ethnicities will metabolize drugs differently. That's another thing. But the problem is, these aren't separate. These compound. You're taking male, you're taking age, you're taking ethnicity, you're taking background, life experience, and putting it all together. And it's much more like a multiplier than a addition of how complex it gets. And how are you meant to run a trial where you just try to figure out, right, this drug works in Black women, for example? You would take the full trial, which would hopefully be really nice and diverse. But of that big trial, let's say 10,000 people, how many will be Black women? Currently and statistically, fuck all. Currently, you might be very lucky on a blind selection to get maybe 500. Are you then going to say, right, if we exclude the 9,500 people and just take this small population, the drug works? Because that is statistically less significant than the standard. The standard is we need 10,000 people. So then the next step is, right, you have to take this small group, like we were just saying, with the money comes in next, and then expand it. And then you have to go and try to run a trial with 10,000, let's say, Black women, and run it and show it works again. But this is a money sink.
Yeah.
This is a money sink, because you're then making it's like, oh, my drug failed, but maybe we can get something out of it. And at that point, common understanding of drug practice, most drugs fail early. And at that stage, the funding is probably going to dry up, and they're not going to do it. So the last mile problem has to find a way to become predictive and accurate at being predictive, rather than actually doing until the last moment. Because actually doing it the way that we're currently doing it for every single subgroup of the population is logistically unfathomable. It's so difficult. But that's not to say it's impossible to predict it, and to look at people's genetics, and to take certain predictive readings that, like, some readings of a person's health might be more important than others. So at least we can do that first. And we see a lot with like 23andMe, and where you can get that and it can give you predictions on what happens there. But if we can take that fun information and maybe a few less fun pieces of information and apply that to a drug or a disease, we can make those predictions. And that'd be class. But it's a problem. Data is a whole nother problem, because let's say, and it's a good discussion of, let's say we had this predictive stuff, had it available. Now, obviously you opt in. This is not a thing you are forced into, obviously. But what if you did this and it came back that you had this information and it said you are 90% likely in your lifetime to die of a heart attack? Do you think you'd get health insurance? Yeah? You think you'd get health insurance? What about life insurance? If you knew that you'd die and the insurer was like, right, well, we know this person's going to...
Yeah, they won't let me, but I would want to.
Of course, but that's the danger of information. If you're trying to get life insurance without this information, the insurance company is taking a gamble. If you're trying to get life insurance with this information, they look at you as a doom clock. And they're like, what now? So...
It's always money, Andrew.
Money.
My
It's
God.
always money.
Because the moment that you said that, in my head, I was like, I would definitely work on my diet.
Yeah, true.
I would definitely exercise more, and I'd probably do a shit ton of research into certain vitamins and things that are within my control.
Yes.
The last thing I thought of was insurance, but yeah.
Yeah. Like,
Like-
what if you do that and you find out you're going to be very sick?
Mm,
And like, let's say if you are at high risk of many chronic illnesses, and
mhm.
that's a situation that you definitely want to have insurance before they pop up, so you maintain a thing. But if you have that information, they're going to charge you so much, and that's going to become a whole other ethical problem that will be walked into. Now, this will probably be, I would hope, resolved in most of the first world, looking at you, America, by making healthcare public. That, like, making that, just throwing that out there. This is not really, I don't think this would be a huge problem in like
Europe.
Ireland or Europe. But
Look, the waiting lists over here are shite.
yeah, and it would only get worse. It would only get
Yeah,
worse because it'd be like, I'm due to get ulcerative colitis in 14 years. Put me on this.
And they'll be like, yeah, no.
Yeah. We'll get you in 43. It's fine.
Exactly.
But
That's the issue. I know we're going on a tangent, but that's such an issue between private and public healthcare,
yeah,
And I think America looks at Europe and it's like, you're so lucky, public healthcare. And it's like, unless I break a bone, I am not going through the hospital.
yeah,
Like, what was it? Like, I've got asthma, have had it for such a long time, right? And I remember just like talking to them, and all doctors, Malta and Ireland, they're like, 4 years if you want to get like your stuff checked, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So what do? Just stay on a steroid.
Yeah.
For but I understand it.
Yeah.
Because money.
Yeah. It's not great.
It's so not good.
It's not good.
Like this, like I don't know what will solve it, because the thing is that like what back in the day they were like trading salt, they were trading gold. There was always an exchange.
Yeah.
Always an exchange.
But there was also a source of resources, and I think that's also a spot that Ireland struggles with. Like on the world stage, Ireland is new money as a country, very new money, and we have an entire history of having all of our wealth taken from us and pulled out of the country constantly. So where all of that wealth was brought to other countries, and they over centuries built up their infrastructure and stuff. Ireland didn't do that at all. Like, Ireland's infrastructure was not really designed for living. It was designed for exporting. And you see that a lot. Like, we love looking at the old train lines, and like, wow, look at those train lines all over the country. Well, all those train lines led right into Dublin port to get all that wood and all those resources and all that food to the UK to feed them. And that was the design. And we still see it in our roads and our public transport today, that it's a direct result of poor design, because it wasn't designed to live in. It was designed to get stuff out.
Wow.
And we're kind of living with that. And I think in the same vein, it means that when Ireland puts a budget out, it's never going to be as efficient as another more established country, because we have to do this extraordinarily 1950s basic stuff to bring up our level and to bring us up to a like first world stage, because we have this history. So when I look at the medical side, I'm always like, this sucks, because I'm just like, it's such, I still don't agree that of all the things to let down, it's the medical side. And they do put so much money into it, but it's so poorly optimized that we still get screwed. So I don't know what the right answer is there, other than like an infinite money cheat code, and that would be class.
But technically, print more paper, you know what I mean? It's just a number.
Yeah.
No, like, as in, sorry, aren't we going cashless? It is a number, okay?
Oh, yeah, true.
Like,
true.
I just...
Funny how the cost of living has gotten so wild. Where did that come from?
Numbers.
Yeah, just numbers.
I think it's more just like having... It just sucks that money got into this. You know what I mean?
I agree, yeah.
Because it's like, people are dying. That is a number that is not quantified yet live-wise, but like qualitatively.
Yeah.
It's, why should a study be shut down?
Yeah.
Or something that's so close yet so far be pushed to the side because it needs X amount, you know,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
when they can't get it. When then God knows who and what is making money out of porn.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I do.
Which is like kudos.
Yeah.
Digital numbers in your bank account too.
Yeah. Facts.
Like,
Big facts.
um,
Hey, there's a lot of brilliant entrepreneurs out there.
oh my
There
God.
are credit to them.
Look, you know what? Maybe scientists should
That's the next step.
should do a diploma
Yeah,
in
that'd be okay.
entrepreneurship.
Yeah, that would be great.
Sign up to my OnlyFans.
Yeah.
And I could cure cancer.
You're going to see so many graphs. Raw data.
Raw data. With something like weird going on in the background, just so that like it's
Yeah.
OnlyFans. You know what I mean?
It'd be perfect. Yeah, there's only one thing peer reviewed about this.
Look, it's all for solutions. It's take two.
It's all good.
Yeah. I should lead the entrepreneurship course.
Go for it. That'd be class.
This is the book that I'm gonna write about shit that I brought up online.
Love it.
Yeah.
What to
Oh
do.
my God. Yeah. Anyways.
What huge segue. I think we were talking about
it keeps going back to money. We were talking about life insurance.
life
and
insurance
people-
from the last mile.
Yeah.
That's what we're
Sorry.
amazing.
Yeah, that's me with the scientist, guys. Okay, so last mile insurance, all this kind of stuff. Now, obviously, you brought up the concept that like someone can opt in, they 90% chance you get your information. Let's say in a hypothetical world, we can take money out of it. Okay, how do you think we can overcome this last mile problem?
Oof. I think a lot of it will be improving things like community science, like being able to get individuals involved. And what I mean by that is not just like signing up to an individual test, but actually saying, I will contribute some of my health information to be able to look at, or even if it's just to shove it into an AI, and the AI can say, for this person, this worked, for this person, this worked. These are the differences. And this is a sacrifice, you know, like, and I really don't think most people would sign up for it, because you're not giving away personal information. You're giving away your human information, like like your physical identity, like your fingerprint, like your human blueprint. Everything about it, you'd be giving that away. But damn, it would help. You know, like that's the reality. And there's so many barriers to getting over this last hump, and they're all entirely understandable. They're all entirely fair. They're all entirely, we can just go, what are you meant to do? Like, I can see the benefits, but trying to sell it, trying to sell, hey, sacrifice your physical, visceral privacy. Give us that information and we can do amazing things with it. It's a hard selling point in a world where we have so much data stolen from us already.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
Fuck you, Facebook.
Yeah, TikTok. TikTok is brutal.
Is it?
Yeah.
I don't know much about
TikTok is ruthless. TikTok takes all your information. TikTok takes how your finger interacts with the screen and the shapes that it makes. It takes your face and all of that information. It takes what you follow. It tries to get information from other apps.
Mm-hmm.
Like, look, I do very well on TikTok, but it's a bad thing to exist. And it's just a data mining app. And like, we have that with TikTok. We have that with Facebook. We have that with the things like Amazon, and 23andMe is a good example. I mentioned it earlier, which is like where you spit in it or something, it takes your DNA and sends it back. But your terms and conditions for that is you are selling your health information to us, and we are going to use that.
Yeah, that's the thing. Eh? I don't know, ISO certification.
Yeah.
But I get it. I understand that hesitation because of the past, you know? And it will obviously be foolish of someone to willingly give that up. I think it probably circles back to the concept of communication. This is what we want to try to do. These are our certifications. Where is your data gonna go? Fucking come here, free tool. Like, this is it. if something happens, can you sue us? Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think the moment that you might be a little bit vulnerable and be like, if we fuck up, this is what's going to happen, probably people can come through. But this is, again, a perfect world. You know what I mean?
This is a perfect world.
And we don't live in that.
No, we don't.
No.
But it is about that communication.
Yeah.
And as much as people have every right to, wouldn't you prefer to live in a world that if you got a really bad diagnosis of something, you could pump all your information into a machine and it would be like, this is the best way to do it.
I think some people like, would you want to know when you die and how you die?
Oh my God. No, I don't think so. Yeah.
That's probably why not, eh?
Yeah. But like, I don't know. I would love to know if it was like when I was very old and very healthy. And
You'd
like,
want
fine.
to exactly.
And I'd be like, grand, this is
like,
great. But
yeah.
But
I wouldn't want to know if I got hit by a bus.
Yeah, like what would I do with my life if I knew that it would only be like 10 years? Like I like my own personal career is like I'm 27 and I've spent my entire youth so far investing in my future. Like all of it. Like I've been studying, working nonstop around the clock. If someone told me I was going to die at 29, I'd be so pissed. I'd be so mad.
That's probably one of my greatest fears.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not happy with what I've done so far.
Yeah,
you know,
I'm the same. Yeah,
like I'm not happy. Like, okay, cool, all of this, I'm not.
Yeah.
But then, will you ever be done? I don't know.
I don't know. Like I like to think that one day I'll be able to like just enjoy the fruits of my labor and like actually sit back and have a sense of achievement. But I also feel like I'm chasing my tail, you know, because I've done so many great things and I'm so bad at sitting down and being like, good job, Andrew. I'm like a space has opened in my calendar. I can now dedicate time to this instead, or I can put more time to this, or I can start this. It's never been a like, let's stop and celebrate this moment. Let's stop and celebrate this big thing. It's always been, what's next?
Yeah.
What do I do next? How do I do it? How do I get there? So I don't know. But in saying that, I hope I grow out of it.
Same. I'm hoping on future Debbie to like deal with that. And that's the thing. It's like, and it probably goes back to what we are talking about here. We know deep down, we know. Do we keep pushing that responsibility on future selves?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. We do.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
Like we're just like, we're navigating this life just hoping that future self will deal with it. And I don't know, that's like an interesting dynamic to understand the future, the past, the present.
Yeah.
And what is all of that kind of stuff.
For sure.
Oof, we're getting into it now. You want to get further into it?
Yeah, we can keep going. Let's go.
Sex differences. And of course, right now, something happened. What happened a month ago? Roe versus
Oh, God. Yeah.
And decision making and all that kind of stuff. Oof.
Yeah.
Heavy.
Very heavy. Big step in the wrong direction, I think.
Yeah. What? Okay, let's... I'm going to be a little bit more unbiased, right? What decision was made? For those that don't know.
So the decision that was made was that the federal government in the US doesn't have any right to tell people what they can, or the federal government made the decision that it's up to the states whether or not women can have access to an abortion. That was the key thing, which meant that some states could keep it going. Some states would take away the rights to bodily autonomy for women.
Okay.
Which is a huge step backwards.
Because politics, right?
Because politics.
Red state, blue state.
Mm-hmm.
Which is unfortunate because I think the cool thing about America was that sometimes there are certain things like cannabis where it's like down to the states, but then there's that unification with the Supreme Court.
Yeah, for sure. I think I think the tough part to consume is how much the US has been like the beacon, the like, this is liberty. This is freedom. This is what all of this is. And yet, this is definitely not a step in that direction.
No.
This is definitely a step in, we're going to control your body and what you can do with it, which is, I don't know, I think your fundamental civil right. Like, you can have anything going on around you, to be honest, because that's, if everyone has their freedoms, you can hear anything. People can say what they want, people can do what they want, all of that, but they don't have any right to impede you, and nobody has any right to put anything into your body or take anything out or have any control really over what you do to it. It's yours.
Yeah.
It's no one else's. Under no circumstances does it belong to anyone else. Under no, like, we dealt with that years ago. You know, that ownership of a body is only one person's, you know? So it's a huge step backwards in that sense. And I just don't really get it. Because as much as I can understand the concept of people who are more pro-life and they're sitting there and saying this is murder, I don't agree with it. Fine. But that's not your call to make. It's like, it's at the end of the day, if you're saying that, you're basically making a worse decision. If that's your stance, you're taking two evils and picking one.
Mm-hmm.
And you're picking, in my opinion, the worst one. You're picking the risk to kill two people than one person. You're taking the risk that this person now is less valuable as a human being.
Yeah.
Because of that, because of another life existence. And that's just from that perspective. From my own perspective, it doesn't click at all. Like, at the end of the day, for most of it, it's cells. And like, I've taught a lot of embryology. It's wild when I hear people talking about like their heart is beating after a certain number of weeks. And I'm like, man, that is not a heart. Like, it is a string of cells, and what you're calling a heartbeat is like a little electrical signal and everything else flexing around it. And you can't call it a heart. You can call it like embryonic cardiac tissue and be like, yeah, that, you know, eventually. And it's only called that because you know what it turns into eventually. But
yeah,
come on.
I think a lot of people that are passionate about pro-life, I feel like they're focusing a lot on the third trimester, you know, which I believe statistically, if abortions do happen in the third trimester, it's very low, you know. I think I wouldn't be able to stomach watching that, you know what I mean? Because then, like, the one thing that probably a lot of people, where I personally think the argument gets really messy about this, is when people are like, life begins at birth, which I do get it. But then it's also like, once that little thing is kicking inside you and you like see the footprints.
Yeah.
I personally don't feel comfortable calling that a bunch of cells. You know what I mean?
That's fair.
So I think more education and information and resources when the thing starts to kick, you know?
Yeah.
And when more life and human form is starting to happen, when there's fingers.
Yeah.
Hopefully, I wish we lived in a place where adoption was way better and more invested in and probably cheaper, in my opinion. Foster systems are worked on and improved on. Imagine all the millions that could have gone in fucking campaigning pro-life versus pro-choice.
That could have fixed the problem. Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's like, why are people getting angry for the sake of getting fucking angry, you know? And probably a lot of the anger comes from men. Why are you telling a lady what to do?
Yeah, no, I get that. No, I do think, like, also, if you're standing on the position that all abortion is murder, I absolutely understand why you'd be very angry. I do. I think if that's your position, I get that.
Mm.
And even talking about when you're saying, like, I agree with you. I think at a certain point, abortion is a negative part of someone's life, or it's a negative thing to do.
Yes.
But I also think taking away the choice to it is the lesser of two
Yeah,
evils.
exactly.
And I
exactly.
think that's the perspective, because I think a lot of people just assume when having this discussion that, oh, this person thinks abortion is great. And it's like, oh, fuck, I really don't.
And that's what like I want to shine a light on.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people, the moment that this comes up, it's like, you're either this or you're that.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, let's talk about the discomfort. Let's welcome the discomfort, that this is not an easy topic to discuss. Number one.
Yeah.
The person going through it does not just wake up and go, haha, nice day. You know what? It's actually really hot and sweaty and I feel uncomfortable being pregnant right now. Out. Yeah. It's not like that.
No,
you
it's
know?
not. And I think it's that implicit sense of that anything medical like that is generally negative. Any kind of surgery, anytime you have to...
It's invasive.
Any kind of invasive thing is a bad thing in your life. Like it's a negative thing. But that's not the point, you know? And it is uncomfortable. And it's something that most people, I know for me, for sure, would never want to have to deal with. It's not something I want to think about. It's not something I want to have to think back about. And that feeling as well. Yes. I think that is entirely a bad thing and I would hate it. And I'd probably live with a lot of regret if it ever happened. And like, it's not my choice to make, but my God, I would feel it. Yeah. I would. Again, lesser of two evils here. I think that's bad. I wouldn't, if I got someone pregnant and they got an abortion and I wanted the baby, we go back to lesser of two evils. I'm devastated. Is my option there more important than any single person's right to their own body? It's not. That's top. That's top in everything. It's the top in clinical research. It's the same reason why vaccines weren't mandated. It's the same thing for all of this, that like you can't be forced to do something to your body. You can't be pinned down and forced and have no out. You have to have that to yourself. And even when it's something really sick and sad and negative that would make any individual curl up a little bit because it feels wrong.
Yeah, because it's like your DNA too. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like I get it. It's kind of
so
like,
human.
Yeah,
this is such a human feeling. It's just so tricky all the same, and so hard to like empathize and rationalize, and everything you want to say. It's just like you're still like, but it does come down to that. It's like all these bad people in the world who either deserve something or they don't. But a lot of the struggle with it is the sheer innocence of a fetus or a baby, or that has no, like, as some would say, free of sin. Just there's nothing. And I think a lot of it comes back to that, where a lot of people would struggle ethically or morally with the idea that is it ethically or morally correct to allow someone who is morally poor or ethically poor as a human being to take away this innocent living thing that hasn't had any of that. And now I've said my stance, but I get the problem.
You get it.
I get the argument and I get the struggle, because it's a human thought. Of course you're going to feel that way. Of course, like most people have a protective tendency towards anything young.
Oh yeah. Like I can't see any fucking puppies cry or kittens and nothing. You know what I mean? Like I can't. I can't. I can't stomach it, you know? So it's horrible. But where do you think the situation went south? Like when do you think the decision just lost its course with Roe versus Wade?
Oh, when it happened, I guess, you know, like I think a lot of the thing that really happened there was that it wasn't established as a human right. It was interpreted as one, wasn't it? And I think even when we look at the foundations of ethics, which I mentioned earlier, which was beneficence, justice, and respect for the persons, even in that phrasing, respect for the persons, that almost in its essence challenges what abortion is in existence, because then it introduces what is persons. And when we're trying to have this discussion, that is a huge core of it. What is a persons? What are we respecting here? What are we thinking about? And I think that needs to be adjusted from a medically ethical point of view. I think that needs to be made more nuanced, which has been a key theme today, which is not everything can be snappy. We can't like do you think all of ethics and research should be able to be pinned down to 3 catchy phrases of beneficence, justice, respect the persons? Should it be? Is that the entirety of what should be considered in
But
ethics?
Andrew, that's how it always was.
That is how it always
Who am I
was.
to change it?
True.
And that's where the welcoming of it nuance comes in, eh?
Yeah.
Where it's like, why are you holding on to something that was mentioned a long time ago and is now fucking a commandment? You know?
Literally. And there's so many moments of consideration. Like, I know the states had their Pregnancy Healthcare Act or the I think it's the Women's Health Equity Act in the 1990, which went through a lot of this. But one thing. It didn't talk about abortion. It didn't talk about anything like that. It talked about everything else. Pregnancies, breast cancer, checkups, everything like that. We're kind of nailing down this has to be equally available as all other medicines. It can't just be like an odd clinic in the state that actually looks at women. It has to be like a thing in hospitals that we look at. But it didn't include that. And I think maybe perhaps at the time it didn't, because Roe v. Wade was in. It was fine, wasn't it? So then you have to kind of push forward 30 years. And maybe there was a bit of assumption that they didn't have to address it because it was there. It was unchangeable. And the reality is, because of that, and we're going to see it now, we're going to see a huge uprising in ethics and defining these things and making sure it's crystal clear and rock solid, and that it's not up to interpretation, that it's written down, that it's there. Because if this is something that can happen, that's insane. Like, we're lucky in Ireland, for example, that we had a referendum. It's in. You know, there's no two ways about it. There's no mixing it up or muddling it. It is what it is. It's written there. It's in the Constitution now. It is stuck in.
Okay.
But over there, it wasn't, and that kind of it left them a little vulnerable. And at the same time, I don't blame them so much, because this is kind of unheard of for a Supreme Court to just go back and change.
Yeah.
And completely reintroduce it based off, I don't know if you read any of it, but they were talking an awful lot about how, since this right wasn't evident in the 1700s when they wrote the Constitution, it didn't fall under a right. And it was like, well, no shit.
Yeah.
What were women back then?
Yeah.
Well, like, there's no portraits of women on their own. There's not they were servants. They were mistresses,
baby makers,
makers, all of those things. So of course they weren't, but have a wider view of the world.
Yeah, like how can you be so set in your ways and so like deep up your ass? You know, or you don't just open up your eyes. But look at that certificate I got over there, my judge. You know,
it's easy when you're successful to just think you're right.
Yeah,
you know?
For sure. Because look at who are you? Look at my house. Look at my car.
Yeah.
Where was I going with this? Because we were talking about nuance and all that. Oh yeah. Do you think it's kind of like a peer pressure to not be the one, like at the decision-making level, to not be the one to be like, oh, by the way, we might face an issue in a few years, and they're like, oh, Debbie, shut up. We're not gonna, like, we're so close. Don't like do this. You know, the case of that rocket that went up and the engineers knew about an O-ring. And the lower level engineers were bringing it up and they were like, no, the media, you know, like this rocket is launching. And then it exploded. Do you think it's a situation of that a little bit?
It could be. But it'd be very hard to pick up on exactly who or when that could have been done or said, because the easiest argument in the world in this point of view is, why would we make something a law which is already legal? Why would we waste our time when we could be pushing forwards? Why would we do that? Why would we bring back up such a controversial issue that is clearly quite split in the country, which will take up a lot of time, which is already apparent, which will have very little push. Because if you're trying to get re-elected and some of the people who elected you are anti-abortion and you just take a neutral stance, you pass because abortion is still legal and you didn't address it. Grand. Great. You get re-elected. So there's a lot of reasons, I suppose, why you wouldn't go for it. Like, surely you could say, right, I'm going to spend my time and do something better, something new, because it was already legal. It was already a thing. People were already doing it. Why would we spend so much time on it? No, I disagree with that entirely. Yeah. I'm just saying, if I was in that mental space and I was trying to make an excuse for it, that's what I would be thinking. Mm-hmm. But I also think that whole setup is very poor. I think that whole design that, you have the law and then you have the interpretation of the laws, and you have to follow both. And this can change at any time. This gets changed by people you vote for. And it's just very sticky when you're trying to consider this. And I think that's just a huge part of the core. But gosh, it really comes down to just talking about ethics. And it's a discussion that really should have been had a long time ago because we just ignored it. And it became so apparent that it was a discussion needed throughout COVID, discussing ethics and what's right and what's wrong and why it's right and why it's wrong and making sure we all do it, that now that it's coming up again and it's another issue of ethics. And the whole concept of ethics is that it's not political, it's human. It's like, take the politics out of it. It's human. What as living, breathing things is right and what is wrong. Yeah. And that's a conversation that's more important than a budget. That needs to be had and that needs to be educated on. And it's not something that's spoken about.
No, it's not. I come from a philosophy background. Okay. So like I love ethics. Yeah. I love ethics. I think that ethics should be brought into primary schools, honestly, because it just really gets you to understand certain theories, and like you're just open to so many concepts. And you're like, that's what they think. And that's all it is. Mm-hmm. It's what they think. Mm-hmm. Having to sit down as a child and study something that kind of triggers you a little bit. Yeah. And still having to write an essay about how they're right and how they're wrong. Yeah. Teaches you a lot.
I think so too. I think a lot of that comes down to critical thinking in general. And I think that is being improved upon. But maybe there's a little bit too much, what's the right phrase? I'd say neoliberal tendencies that anything you learn must be useful.
Okay, carry on that.
And that if it's not directly useful to like a vocation or something like that in your future, why would we spend time on it? Wow. So I think there'd be a lot of that kind of imprint, and it'd be like, why are we letting our kids spend their precious time in school thinking about thinking? Thinking meta about thinking. Because it's
fun.
Yeah, but life isn't meant to be fun. It's meant to be successful.
I know. But it's fun.
Fun doesn't get money. We covered this.
Those are digital numbers, Anderew.
And they make you happy and feed you.
Yeah. I'm just going to purchase something with Dogecoin instead. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, look at those coins. Don't tell me that shit is not created, man.
It's creative. Yeah, it's creative.
Yeah. It's fun. That's it. I'm going to start my own homeschooling.
Yeah.
Just a bunch of hippies.
Course outcomes. Will be happy. Yeah.
Will be happy. Yeah. I don't know. I think it's just like...
You'd have 9-year-olds going through a midlife crisis. Thinking about the world too much.
Anderew, I promise you, I had a diary saying, well, but where is God?
Gosh.
I couldn't get it.
Yeah.
I never understood it, but like, it's just... life, it's interesting. That's the cool stuff. That's where all our good books come from.
I think so too.
Do you think the world is ready for euthanasia?
Ready? No.
Do you think it will be more complicated than abortion?
No.
Same.
Yeah, I don't think.
Why did they pick the hard one first?
Yeah. True. I think so. I think a big obstacle in the way of euthanasia right now is the stigma around suicide and drawing that line.
Yeah.
And trying to determine when someone has the right and of sound mind to make this decision versus when they aren't of sound mind, and our understanding of what sound mind is bad. We're not very good at that. We're still trying to figure out at what point a personality trait becomes pathological. Like, I was speaking to a clinical psychologist not too long ago, and he just said to me, all symptoms of mental health conditions aren't a mental health problem until it's making a negative impact in your life. And you could be hearing voices, you could be quite low and depressed, like by behavior. But if you feel fine and you're content with your life and you're having all of these wild symptoms, that is not a mental health issue. That is just a living, breathing human person who's totally fine with their life.
Really?
Who just has all of these symptoms.
Whoa.
Because at what point, why would you go to, would you go into a doctor and be like, I'm extraordinarily happy, I'm quite content in my life, everything is going fine, I make money, I wake up, I do all that, and I'm not at all negatively impacted. By the way, I have all of these symptoms. At that point, they'd be like, okay, but you're fine. Yes, right, we'll get you checked out. And maybe you would go and get it checked out. Would you go on medication? Probably not. Why? You're happy. Like, you're fine. Everything is going fine. These things only become an issue when they're an issue in the world.
When, like, you can't get out of bed?
Maybe. When you don't fit in the world anymore.
Okay.
As long as you can keep moving a cog and you're happy, what's the problem? What's the problem?
But right now, I don't, like, this is something that I'm just, like, asking, right? It's like, is there a rise in anxiety and depression?
Yeah.
Or are people just more aware of it now? And it's less of a taboo?
I would say it's probably a little bit of both.
Both.
I think there probably is a rise because I think there might be a little bit of an issue at the moment of people being so focused on their personhood, they forget their humanity. Like, they are so focused on who I am, what I am wants to do and fit into this world and be productive and be all of that, that we far too often forget that we're just little people in our brain controlling a big machine that controls everything. And we've lost, we put so much work into the person and who we think we are and who this person is going to be and what's going to be on their epitaph. And we don't put enough time into the machine that gets us there. And this disconnect between our person and our human is really bad. Like, you need to realize, and everyone needs to think that you need to feel content as a person, but your body needs to be looked after too. And a lot of your body is the part that actually drives these issues, things like depression, things like anxiety. And as we move forward into like this new world, this new vocation focused world, we've no focus on the humanity and we have all the focus on the personhood. And we forget the humanity and it gets left behind. And that drives depression and it drives anxiety. Now, this is all like, it's quite generalized, but you get the point.
But you simplified it in such an interesting way. Person and human.
Yes.
Same thing.
Mm-hmm.
But like completely.
Yeah.
Whoa.
So I think there's a big aspect of that to look at. And I think that it is on the rise. But I also think us being more aware of depression and anxiety is kind of like the splashback. It's like, oh, I'm a flesh sack. I'm a bunch of flesh that needs to be fed and watered. And if I don't do that, everything else crashes and burns. And your body crashes and burns. Like, we see this all the time with people who like go to college and they study all night and they destroy their body and they do all of that. And by some coincidence, it's also a terrible time to develop mental health issues, you know, and you put yourself under tremendous stress and no one ever has money and you're constantly under this pressure to like get to the next day. That is like, at points as a person, fulfilling. You're succeeding. You're living a big life. You're doing all of that. What have you forgotten? The human, the physical thing that has to do it all, that has to actually get you through it. Because without it, you're just a voice in your head. So I
Floating rock mentality, kind of.
I think so.
But then you also don't want to be that person that's like, oh, it doesn't matter. I'm a meat suit,
Yes, true. They're both important.
you know?
I-
And
no,
that's
I-
where you
I-
find that like balance, you know what I
absolutely
mean?
agree. And I think that is something that we need to get to, because isn't it so easy to forget about your humanhood, but be very successful as a person? Very successful. But then if you're constantly looking after your human, your person can fall behind. And whether it's society or whether it's being human, we don't want to fall behind.
No.
We want to be at the front. We
do.
We want to be leading the charge, and it's not the human that leads the charge always. It's more often the person.
Yeah.
So conflict. So I whether or not the depression anxiety is getting higher, I'd say it's a little bit of both, but
Yeah.
there's definitely a disconnect there. How we got here from euthanasia, not sure.
That's what I was going to say.
But-
Back on euthanasia. No, but like, is it? I'm pretty sure the argument is, if we're going to stay with like personhood and humanity.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I got into a very scary accident. I'm in a coma. For now, it's just human Debbie. It's not person Debbie.
Mhm.
Is it probably just like the limitation of science and being like, Debbie can go because Debbie the person is gone. Debbie the person is never coming back.
Mhm.
Because a lot of the time when it comes to people in comas or a vegetative state, they're like, it's okay to turn off the machines. You know?
Mhm.
I feel like which I kind of sometimes see as a form of euthanasia, but that's like commonly just done
Yeah.
everywhere, you know?
Yes.
It's not up for debate.
Yes. Though it absolutely is euthanasia.
Yeah.
By definition.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just someone else making the
Exactly.
decision. But that's actually it's an
no.
interesting point to bring up. Someone else can make the decision, but you can't.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's what I don't understand. So, like, let's take Ireland, for example. Euthanasia is not legal here.
Hmm.
My machines can still be turned off, though.
Yeah.
And they are.
Yeah, for sure. And
Then tell me what the fuck is that?
I don't know. But
There's a gap in the market.
there's a gap in the market. Oh my gosh. I would also mention though, as much as it's illegal, it's also probably happening when people are making people's passing easier. That's definitely a thing. It's definitely
Like-
something that goes on.
Like morphine.
And increasing the drips and removing all discomfort until it's all gone.
Mm.
You know, I think that's actively happening. But having the discussion around it,
I think euthanasia, then probably the reason why they're not classifying it as that, because with euthanasia, you kind of sign up
yes,
to die.
yes, yep. So when you're getting the machine turned off, someone meaningful to you can do it.
Yeah.
When you're getting loaded up on morphine, your doctor can do it, but you can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Tricky. And I suppose that you can't do it is probably because you're fighting a human instinct of you do one thing every day.
Survive.
How can you be both of sound mind and counter that every day, every instant reflex that you have, instinct that you have in your body to survive? Everything. That's as the most human thing. You're surviving. Whether you think you are or not, you're surviving.
Mm-hmm.
So how can you both say that someone is of sound mind and making that decision when they're a human being? I think a lot of it might come down to that. And I guess there just needs to be more discussions about that, because at the end of the day, it's more complicated than that. Someone could be having a future ahead of them that they don't want. Like many, many degenerative diseases will leave you in a position where you will like either lose your control of your body or lose your personhood in things like dementia and things like that.
Yeah.
And at that point, there's no longer the person to make that decision. And then that's, again, another thing. So maybe you want to have that. Well, do you have that?
That's a lot of the argument. There's a girl back home, she's an activist for that, for euthanasia, because Hunter's syndrome, something, I forgot what
Huntington's.
Hunting.
Yeah.
The comments that she gets are just like, oh, why won't you do it yourself? Da, 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 da. You know what I mean? And she's just saying, she's like, listen, there's going to come a point in time where her name is Sam. Sam is not going to be Sam anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that I want this done to me now.
Yeah.
I'm saying that the moment that I get to that point, I do not want to burden my family. I do not want to be like that. I want to go with a little bit of dignity, which you get.
Facts. Yeah.
Why do you want to be with? Who would want to choose a life of being in a care home
Mm-hmm.
for 30 years or God knows, with all those sores and all of that?
Yeah.
And I wouldn't want to burden my family having to like feel guilty because they
Yeah.
haven't seen me.
Or pay for it
Pay-
as well.
You know what I mean? And it's also, again, it goes back to personhood versus humanity. I can't tell them a funny joke when they're here.
Yeah.
You know, when they come to visit me. Yeah, they just look at me fucking drooling, shit my pants.
Yeah.
You know?
Literally.
God knows why.
So yeah, it is tricky. And I think the reality is we will end up at a point where this is the public discourse and people are talking about it, and it's not till we get to that point can it be legalized. Like I think if it came up in a referendum next year, it would be defeated easy because we haven't talked about it as a public. But I suppose we just need to spark interest in talking about these kind of ethical issues. Like we brought that up a lot today. We're actually just talking about the meaning and the purpose and the right and wrong and the morality matters.
Yeah.
Even if you end up with a split room, at least you have an informed room.
Yes.
You know, so when it actually comes up in a meaningful time, like a referendum or something like that, you have good discourse, not TikTok or Twitter discourse. You have good discourse. And I don't think we're trained enough yet.
No.
We're still puppies being trained in how to have good, productive discourse on controversial topics.
Yeah. And I think that's why there is such a rise in podcasting.
Yeah.
Not to make it like really superficial, because like you obviously have your own one too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I think that's why so many people are starting one. And that's because this is probably the new way to find an excuse to have a conversation, a deep, meaningful conversation with someone that's an expert in the industry.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, unfortunately, if I were to just like reach out to Mr. Shaw and just be like, listen, I really want to have a chat with you, they're like, why?
Yeah.
You know,
true. Yeah.
it's not worth my time.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I absolutely weaponize my podcast to just talk to people I want to talk to all the time.
So
I just send the email and I'm just like, I have a podcast. You can get this much exposure. We want to do it.
Yeah.
And it's just like,
can you also sign the book that I
yeah. Just right on that there.
Yeah.
But it's good.
Yeah, it's so good.
It's enjoyable. But I think at the same time, it's trying to do bigger good. Like it's trying to open up conversations and get people to listen to it and not listen to short form. Like podcasts are actually really good at getting people to have big discussions and have good conversations about complex issues and not just do the clickbait, but actually dive deep and really face all of it. Play devil's advocate, play that strong believer and go through all of the motions. And that's what people need. They need to hear the motions because nothing is easy. Nothing is simple.
And that is how long form conversations and long form content, like this is the space to have it, you know? And I'm so thankful that the medium is available to us.
Mm-hmm.
It's more just like figuring out, because unfortunately we are dealing with humans at the end of the day where it is very cult-like.
Yes.
You know?
Of course. Yeah, it's humans.
It's humans.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's like, if only the cult was the Take-Two cult.
Yeah.
Because then or the living room logic one, where they get a little bit of independent thought. Like,
yes.
I'm sure that it's the same with you, and that's what you're trying to promote is listen, fact check, research, and dive into another rabbit hole.
Yeah.
So that then you come up with your own nuance. That's what we want. and it's fucking short form content that we're living at right now.
Yeah, and that's and its own, and like we said at the very beginning, it's the only way to get exposure is the short form as well, and to actually get known and to use that. And I suppose that's all we can do, and then try to drive the few people that actually follow through into something very productive and very helpful.
I think it's like I'm just talking out loud, but probably the place where I lack is encouraging people to talk about it more with other people, you know?
Yeah.
It's probably word of mouth. Probably goes back to like philosophers, like in ancient Greece.
Yeah.
It was, I came across this cool teacher.
Yeah.
Come join me.
Yeah.
You know, come to this class.
Yeah, we have that. So in science communication, we call that the water cooler moment.
Okay.
Where two people are in their office at the water cooler and they say, hey, did you hear about this? I heard about this. And you're trying to, when you're talking about science, we're trying to do something, your goal is to make someone go, that's interesting. I'm going to mention that to someone.
I see.
The water cooler moment, where it's just casual conversation, bring it up, and it's something they talk about. And if you've done your job, one person will be able to talk about it for 2 minutes and they will be able to bring it up to someone else. And then that person might be like, did you hear about that? No. Yeah. And it'll move on. But maybe that's the easiest way to do it, because no one's going to take their friend and sit down and try to regurgitate it all. But if you can at least raise the awareness just a little, and have those little moments, that's good.
Yeah.
You know, and then you get a more informed public, which is so valuable and so important.
Do you think we'll get there, Andrew?
I think we already have an informed public. We just don't have the people who are most informed speaking out loud all the time. You know, I think it's very often
Andrew for press.
Yeah. So I just think
you got my vote, my dude.
Thank you, pal. Yeah. Call me in 2045.
When I'm not done yet.
Yeah. When I've met all my goals and I'm like, I'm changing career
you know,
completely.
I'm just gonna be president.
Yeah, but I do genuinely like take Ireland as an example. We're one of the most educated countries in the world. We're the most educated country in Europe.
Yeah, and everyone flocks off to Canada.
Yeah, well, that's because we're wanted. We're high commodities.
Hey.
This is good. You know, this is fine. We're not going over to just do any job. Like, we're sending over all kinds of people. You know, whilst before, like in the 70s and 80s, it was any work that people could get. Now it's not like that. Now people are getting headhunted. Like, it's been a great transition. But I think it does go to say we do definitely have an informed public. It's just we need to stop looking at the people who are the most noisy as the people who are willing to talk as being, oh, they're the informed ones because they have an opinion.
Yeah.
You know, like...
It's the concept of the silent majority.
The silent majority.
Yeah. And I think, like, it's ballsy to just put your name on a screen, you know what I mean?
Yes.
But it's like, if I value the conversation more than I value someone criticizing me, then I think I'm in the right place, you know? I think I'm in the right direction. And it's with you as well, you know?
Yeah, I agree.
And I think if people were to overcome the fear of trolls for asking a question and being curious, then the world would become a better place.
Yeah.
It's more just like questioning whether or not we will overcome that heavy criticism. Because I kind of brought it up in a podcast where I was a guest on, but Jesus was crucified, you know?
Yeah.
Socrates, all the philosophers, they were killed.
Yeah.
Who knows how many prophets or people at that time felt like they were doing something similar and got fucking wiped off of the face of the planet.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting, you know?
It is. But on that exact same note, it's also very human to put someone up and crucify them, isn't it?
It is.
You know,
it
so
really is.
As much as we can make the argument of maybe there'll be less of that, it's quite human.
It's
you know, the second a leader oversteps, they're gone. The second they get something wrong too often, they're gone. So it's about, maybe that's let's just pray that's not a human thing and it's a person thing, and we can mold that.
But like, we wonder, it's been around for so long.
It's in horses, it's in lions, it's, you know.
Like, so many people are like cancel culture, and it's like same thing,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, it is. It is. And like a lot of it,
It's just less deadly now, in my opinion, you know?
well,
Rather
yeah.
than getting hanged in public as it used to
Well,
be.
But to have another perspective on that, if we used to put all of our value in the human side and now we put it all in the person side, being cancelled is having the person side killed.
Oh, yeah,
And
for sure.
you're just left with the human.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then everything that person had built up to be, gone.
Because now this is like what we're prioritizing.
That's what we're
And it is that
prioritizing.
social
Yeah.
isolation.
Yeah.
Like, I find, again, there are some people that are cancelled and they come back with a docu-series and
Of course.
a book and all
Yes,
that kind of
yes.
stuff. But then there are people that cancelled, own it, and then figure, like Logan Paul, that's such
Good
a good
example.
such a
Yeah.
good job, you know?
Yeah.
He's still a bit like of a douchebag, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? And the way he talks,
But-
he didn't lose his spark though.
No,
And that's the important thing.
it is the important
He
thing.
nearly lost it.
Yeah.
But there's so many other people too that like,
It's true.
so yeah, it's interesting, eh? I don't know what the fuck I'm gonna title this conversation, man.
There's a lot of things you could title this
Yeah.
conversation.
Thank you though, Andrew. I appreciate
Oh,
it.
I had a great time.
Did you?
Yeah.
I
no,
hope
it was-
I didn't like mind fuck you so much.
No, it was fine. It was fine. A few new questions and a few ones I was comfortable with, but we went from one to the other, so it was okay.
Yeah.
I was okay. I was comfortable half the time, but there's nothing wrong with discomfort either. That's
No.
all good too.
No, only good
Yeah,
stuff
you
comes
have-
out of discomfort.
Exactly. Have to have those conversations. Too.
Yeah. And you are officially another guest that I can tick off the list.
Great.
Good combo.
Yeah.
you know?
happy days.
Yeah,
Yeah.
happy days. Thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thank you very much, Debbie.
Thank you everyone for listening. Ciao.